Hi guys, so I'm about to analyse a game that's been submitted by MaestroooO, who's I've reviewed before, and this is actually a daily game against somebody rated 1280. MaestroooO at the time was rated 1150. So what he told me was this game was frustrating. He says that the computer told him that he had an overwhelming advantage at one point in the game, but that he couldn't spot it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the analysis board and show you how to use the computer analysis to learn from your mistakes, to learn about missed opportunities as well. So I'm on chess.com, obviously. I'm going to click analysis. Okay, so you can see now immediately in the game summary, or the advantage summary, the game starts pretty even, balanced for a while, and then at this point white has several moves where he has a massive advantage. This is +7, so that's the equivalent of you having all your pawns and your opponent only having one pawn left. It's the equivalent of 7 pawns in value, in material value. And then there was a blunder. So the advantage goes straight away from +7 down to -3. That's minus means that it's in black's favour. Black is the stronger position. Okay, so let's work through the game and let's try and find out how we can use the analysis to understand what went wrong and what could have been done differently. Okay, so white opens with e4, black responds with c5. This is the Sicilian defence. White then plays a little bit of a quiet move, I think. d3 is okay. I mean, clearly it defends that pawn, but one problem is that the light square bishop now is blocked in. You know, so even if you were to fianchetto there and move the bishop there to g2, it still can't get past this little pawn chain. So one idea, if you're thinking in terms of controlling the board, might be to move. So let's see what the computer says. So okay, this has -0.1, so that's in black's favour, right? So I'll take that move back and let's try that instead. -0.03, so there's not much difference in it. Okay, so that was played. Black responds with e6. This is obviously moving the king's pawn is always good because it releases the queen and the dark square bishop. In this case, queen and light square bishop in white's case. So standard book move. Knight comes out to f3. Again, this is standard. Knight comes out to c6. You can see every time it puts the book symbol on there that this is known theory, and this is a valid and respectable line. This says this is a good move, moving the knight out to d2. Obviously the knights are now paired, they've got each other's backs. Again, the other downside is, look at this other bishop now. Both bishops have no way to get out into the board and into play, so white is to a degree hampering his own development at this point. The computer says that c3 is best, and if I click on that, it will show me c3, and it shows a tiny advantage to black, which you can see in the bar to the left of the screen, and then it will show you the continuation if good moves were played from that point, but we're not going to do that. Okay, so this is the move that was played. Both bishops are blocked in. Black then comes in with his knight, so he has failed to develop any more pieces. He's moving one piece twice, which is not a crime, but I mean, let's just see what happens. Let's say that knight takes, pawn takes. Black now has these doubled pawns on the d file. And you know, what really was the point of that? White now has the advantage, 0.83 ahead in advantage. So and this pawn would be vulnerable, left there. So to me, I don't really see the point of that move. I think it is questionable as well. The computer's saying that d5 is best. So you can always follow through those lines, but the knight comes in. Now, instead of capturing, which would have definitely been advantageous for white, white plays the knight again to c4. Now, it's possible that that was the plan all along, and that's why the knight came to d2 in the first place. It's not a bad square for that knight to be on, by any means. And then black moves his knight back. So he's used two moves and not changed his position at all. There are no other minor pieces out in the middle of the board, controlling squares on the board. He's obviously looked at that position, which is bizarre in a daily game, and then thought, actually, it's not so good after all, I'm going to move back. So, certainly questionable. White's dark square bishop comes out to e3. So we've got a slightly kind of London system type structure here, with this pyramid starting to form in the middle, or Jabava London with the knight there, but flipped over to the king side. This bishop is in an okay position. It's not really threatening the back rank, though. If you look at all the squares where this bishop could actually hit now, none of them are on the back rank. When you've got a bishop that's more to the side of the board, then it can attack the back rank. So there's nothing. That bishop isn't even looking towards anything important at this point in the game. A computer says that's an inaccuracy, and that pushing e5 would actually be a better move. So there it would be defended by two knights, and it would be hampering black's ideas of bringing out his other central pawns. Black plays d6. The computer now has white at half a point up at this point, which is not very, not highly relevant. But now things start to change. White pushes the pawn to d4, which the computer says is an excellent move. So let's look at why this is good. So it's attacked by a pawn and a knight, but it's defended by a bishop and a knight and the queen. So if pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes, let's see what happens. Oop. Yeah, so pawn takes, knight recaptures, excellent move. Knight recaptures, which is questionable, and now white has a choice. It can either recapture with the queen, which would have the advantage of bringing the queen off the back rank, enabling white to castle long if he wants to do that, or he can capture with the dark squared bishop. Chooses to go for the queen. The computer says that is best. Now has white over one pawn up in in advantage in the game. Now, if we step back at this point and look at the board, what do we see? What is the story that's going on here? Well, clearly, black had one piece developed, which was his knight from b8, that has been jumping around the board, achieving very, very little with these repeated moves, and he now has no development at all. In order to complete development, he's going to have to move 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces off the back rank and castle. Okay, white is almost there. So that's black's 5 moves away from completing development. White only has to get rid of that bishop and castle. That's it. So there's a serious advantage here, in terms of development at least, which is reflected by the fact that the computer has white a full point ahead. Also, black can't immediately develop the dark squared bishop, because if he did so, that would undefend g7, and the queen could come in and seriously threaten that rook. So I think anyone looking at this position would say, okay, white definitely has a preferable position. I think castling queenside would make sense. Then you've got a rook lined up behind the queen there. So it seems like there's every opportunity here for white to take advantage. I think one issue is this the light square bishop still isn't in the game. It's got only 2 squares where it can move right now. D3 would be fairly quiet. It would be kind of solidifying this. It's almost like stepping into the role of a pawn in the pawn chain. So it wouldn't be attacking anything on the board. It wouldn't really be doing much in terms of control. It would be a quiet move. The alternative would be to move to E2 and then maybe out, into a more attacking position like H5 there. So let's see how the game progresses. Knight comes out. The computer says this is an inaccuracy because of the move E5. So see here, it's an inaccuracy, and then it says this is what it foresees or analyzes as the likely continuation if everyone's playing well. Okay, so let's look at that. So I'm going to click where it says E5 there. Okay, and so let's say we do that. Then what's black going to do? He's going to move his knight there, and white can capture the pawn. Bishop recaptures, pawn recaptures, castles. Okay, so that is what the computer sees as the likely continuation, and it has white 1.83 points up at this point. Okay, so the knight comes out. White then castles. Still, this advantage is now starting to show, 1.4 points ahead. The computer says that pushing E5 would again have been better. Now if you see, if E5 is pushed, then this pawn cannot capture, because that would be an instant checkmate. The queen now has the rook on her back, so she could go straight in there, capture black's queen, checkmate, nowhere for the king to go. Black plays a decent move here, D5. So he's now got this nice pawn chain here, which will take some breaking down. It is in the face of E4. So white now has the choice either to move the knight out of the way or do some kind of counterattack or capture with E4. And he decides to move the knight in, up the board. And I like this move because it's moving the knight towards the black king. It sounds so simplistic, but if your knights are far away from your opponent's king, how can those knights be involved in an attack? And you generally need about 4 pieces to, at least 3, to mount an effective attack. So moving your knights towards the enemy king makes perfect sense. Computer likes that. It's got us at 1.3 up. Now, this is a blunder apparently. B6 is a blunder, and it rockets white to a 7.68 point advantage in the game. Right, now how should we be capitalizing on this? Well, the computer's telling us here. It's saying the bishop to b5 is pretty deadly. And indeed it is. I mean, it's bringing yet another piece out, pushing that other piece towards the enemy king. So here black can either block with the bishop. So here's another way that you can use the analysis board, right? So we're 7.6 up now. If the bishop moves there, we're 10.4. No, 9.16 now. It takes time to work out all the different permutations. So that makes black's situation worse. So let's ignore that one. What if the knight goes in there? Okay, the knight goes in there is actually a better move, apparently. And I believe that is the move that was played. Oh no, it's yeah. So this is a blunder because it allows that f7, so f1 to b5 continuation. What the computer is saying that black should have done at that point is bring the queen out, which would have prevented that move. Okay, so knight moves, pawn comes out, which is a blunder, And what white should be doing now is, I mean, look, if you've ever got a piece on the back rank earlier on in the game, you need to be thinking about, okay, can I involve this piece in the game? So you're doing two things. You're saying, can I mount an attack? Can I control more of the board? And obviously, there's the benefit of connecting the bishops here, so that would have been a great move. That is actually the move that white played. So this is where his massive advantage comes in. Black plays a decent move to defend with a knight. White captures on d5, which is great. See, if this pawn recaptures, that's starting to make the king look very vulnerable there. Bishop comes out, attacking the queen. That's a decent move. So let's look at the board again now. This knight is pinned to the king. It can't move. Okay. This pawn on g7 is undefended. I would definitely be thinking about attacking that pawn right now with a move like, I think queen to g4 looks reasonable to me. The only problem with that move is, no, maybe it's not too bad. If bishop takes, pawn recaptures, you've still got this pair of pawns in the middle and still got a 7.5 point advantage, so that looks decent. Bishop comes out. Okay. Computer's actually saying that queen to e4 is best. I would have looked at g4 as well. So let's look at these. So in terms of score, 7.37 now. e4 is slightly better, 7.66. I'll move back. What about f4? 7.35. g4, 5.93. So it's saying that that's actually an inaccuracy. So that was played, and it says excellent move. Also has the scores up here, of course, on the right. So it'll show you these as your options. Castles, which is clearly a good idea. Now, blunder. Okay, so clearly there's a blunder, which is that this pawn knight here has been left undefended. Okay, and this is really the turn of the game. That move is where the game turns. You don't want to leave pieces undefended. I think, let's see what saying. Okay, this is interesting. So the computer says that is the better move. Okay, we're encouraging this pawn to recapture, opening up the king. We've got two bishops still on the board. You know, if they're on this left side of the board, then they're bearing down on the king's corner there, and things are looking very, very dangerous for black. And black really hasn't even started to mount an attack of any kind really at this point. Okay, so that's what the computer's saying should have been done. Even alternatively, you could clear some stuff off the board, and even there, what are we, 1.63 ahead, so that advantage has really evaporated. Why has it evaporated? Well, we've got rid of, oh, it's saying that would be a blunder. Yeah, so it's really saying you need to come in here with the pawn, and one of the reasons for that is when this pawn moves out of the way, this rook is eyeing down on the queen. Okay, so it's really more a question of timing. You know, so what we're saying, if you were to capture that, let's say take that pawn now, this bishop is pinned to the queen. It cannot capture on there, and there's a very great danger of this rook just coming in and capturing the bishop, threatening the queen, threatening f7. It's all going wrong for black. So let's see what happens in the game. Castles, and here it just really falls apart. You know, knight takes. Queen is now under attack. Queen moves back, which is a decent move. Bishop moves back, which is okay, but the computer's saying that it would have been a little bit better to exchange bishops at that point. And here's the next blunder. Now, this is interesting because you can see what white is trying to do. Black cannot capture the bishop because the pawn is pinned because the queen is there. And the threat is queen takes g7 mate. So why is it a blunder? Well, let's ask the computer why it's a blunder. It's a blunder because of knight g6. Yeah. And then g takes h6. Hang on. Knight to g6, then queen c3 should have been played. So again, we're just maneuvering the queen so it can come in on the diagonal against g7. So, you know, why is it a blunder? Well, it's giving black an opportunity to reinforce his king, strengthen his king, and at the same time, obviously, there's a discovered attack there on the queen on g3. So the reason why it's a blunder is, you know, the computer can quite often say, "Oh, that's a blunder." So let's just follow this through. Okay, so it's saying that black now has an overwhelming advantage. Why is that? So we'll follow this train. Okay, knight to g6 comes back. Queen comes across to there, and then the bishop is lost, basically. So now black is actually 5 points up in terms of material, and the king is relatively safe. There's no dark square bishop to take advantage of these weak squares. That's been lost. So yeah, I think we can understand now why the computer calls that a blunder. That this is what happens. White moves the queen over to h3. The knight comes in to attack the queen. At this point, the bishop should probably capture the knight. Nope. Queen decides to move there again. Okay. Knight moves back. Queen moves in there. Bishop is lost. And then there's a fork on the rook and the queen. So, you know, you always need to bear in mind whenever any of your pieces is diagonally connected to a knight in this way, always be aware of the possibility that that knight can move in that L shape into the attack. The other one is when it's 2 squares away, either across or down, that the knight can then move to there or there. Okay, so moving the rook there, according to this, is excellent, but you know, then the rook goes in, the knight goes in, rook falls, there's a check. White is 7 points up in material at this point, and then the coup de grace, the bishop comes in because white has left his queen and king on the same diagonal. A better move would have been, obviously, at this point, to move the king over to b1, where that skewer wouldn't have been possible. Well, it's actually a pin on the queen, so the queen would have to fall. So yeah, I think in terms of what was the turning point of the game, let's rewind. Let's look at this bar on the left hand side. Okay. This is the point where white has the massive advantage. So what should white be thinking about at this point? I would be thinking in terms of certainly bringing the light squared bishop over where it's eyeing down on h7. You've also got ideas of pushing the h-pawn up the board. So there's plenty of opportunity there. The computer actually says this is a blunder, but so really I think the key to a lot of this is that discovered attack or potential discovered attack by this rook. So it was a good idea to castle queenside, right, and bring this rook onto the d file, this semi-open d file, and then that enables ideas of capturing there, and that knight is in trouble then, because it's being attacked by, it would be attacked by the pawn and the knight and the bishop. So this would have been quite an overwhelming attack for white. But I think the opportunity to attack was missed, and quite often that does happen when you're playing a player who's a bit higher rated. Sometimes you can think, well, I'm nervous, I'm not confident about this particular approach, but you should go ahead and do it anyway. I think if you see an attack, you need to attack. That tends to be how games are won, unless you make a silly blunder, which is actually, we can say this game was lost rather than won. So that's my analysis. I hope it's a bit helpful for you. It's definitely an interesting game. And I think, yeah, this, let's just go over it one more time. This is the key point. The computer keeps saying you have to capture on e6. So when you're working through the analysis, look at the lines that the computer is suggesting, and then try and figure out, ask yourself, oh, why didn't I see that? It's not always easy to see why the computer thinks something is a good idea or a bad idea, but there are often tips and useful pointers in there. So unlucky Maestro on this occasion. You'd played a good game up to that point. You'd definitely played a stronger game than Syed Storm, and in this instance you just failed to finish him off, really. Thanks for watching.